Welcome to Boys in the Hood TV. Today we're going to be discussing the life of Lil AK from the Black P-Stone jungles, who will be charged with murder and attempted murder. 40-year-old Dante Solomon, aka Lil AK, was a well-known member of the violent street gang, the Black P-Stone jungles. In 2011, he would go down for a robbery and do over 3 years in prison. Now, prior to going to prison, he dated a woman named Donisha Gregory, but by the time he got out, they would see each other off and on, but both would focus on doing their own thing. Solomon would focus on taking care of his kids and getting a job, which he eventually would do. He also would start going to church and dating other females. Now, his ex-girlfriend, Donisha Gregory, would also start doing the same thing. But things would go left when Donisha would eventually start seeing a member from the Rollin 60 Crips, known as RP, and this would piss Dante off. But even with this new relationship, both Dante and Donisha would still kick it and even spend time together on Valentine's Day. But things would start to escalate once Dante found out that RP of the Rollin 60s was now living with Donisha. Now, this would lead to a confrontation between Dante and RP at a gas station sometime later. And allegedly, RP from the Rollin 60s will pull out a strap on Dante and takes him and his girlfriend down the street. Now, months later, on July 16, 2018, Dante would decide to head over to Donisha's house, but she wasn't home. So afterwards, he would decide to leave to go smoke and drink for a few hours before heading back to her house at around 6 p.m. Now, once he returned back to her house, he noticed a white Range Rover, which belonged to RP from the Rollin 60s, and this would set him off. He would then proceed to honk his horn while driving back and forth down the street in front of her house, yelling out her name through the window. Now, initially, Donisha would ignore him, but eventually she would head to the second floor window and speak to him. Dante would get out of his car and continue to yell at her. He would tell her to come outside so he could talk to her, but when she told him no, that's when he started yelling out, "Fuck naps, fuck crabs." Now, while all of this is taking place, RP from the Rollin 60s was sitting down next to the bedroom door, holding on to his 9mm. Now, Donisha began to beg Dante to leave because her kids were at home and she didn't want things to escalate. But Dante would respond, "I don't give a fuck." Not long after, Donisha's father would pull up and he would try to calm Dante down and tell him to come back another day to talk to Donisha. But Dante wasn't having it and continued to yell at Donisha. Moments later, RP from the Rollin 60s would stand up and stand next to Donisha at the bedroom window while holding his gun. And that's when Dante put out his strap and things would go from bad to worse. Moments later, Donisha could be heard yelling, "I don't care about no gun." And that's when Dante started blasting. He would let off multiple shots at the upstairs window at both Donisha and RP. Now, RP would duck down, but Donisha would be hit with a single shot to her head as she fell to the floor. Dante would then hop back into his car and flee the scene. Family and friends who were already there at her house at the time would immediately call 911, who would arrive on scene. But sadly, Donisha would die long before the EMTs would arrive.
In Exposition Park, where police are searching for the person who shot and killed a woman overnight, it happened on Dalton Avenue, just south of Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. Officers say the woman died before paramedics could get her to the hospital.
Now, once the police began their investigation, Dante would be identified by witnesses as a shooter, and only days later, on July 18th, he would be arrested by LAPD and be held on a $2 million bond. He would be charged with murder, attempted murder, shooting into an inhabitant dwelling, along with gang and gun allegations. Now, of course, Dante would plead not guilty to all these charges. Now, once his trial took place, Dante would take the stand and testify. He would tell the jury that he and Donisha was in an open relationship, and on the day of the shooting, she had asked him for some money, but at the time, he didn't have it, so he told her that he would come back later after work to bring the money to her. He claimed that once he got off of work at 1 p.m., he arrived at her house, but she wasn't there, so that would lead him to go to the bars to smoke and drink. He would claim that he wasn't fully intoxicated, but he did have 6 shots of Remy before leaving the bar. Now, he would admit that once he returned to her house at around 6 p.m., he saw RP from the Rollin 60s white Range Rover parked outside, which did upset him. And in that moment, he felt like Donisha was disloyal to him, knowing that RP had tried to kill him months prior at a gas station. But he would proceed to tell the jury that on that night, he claimed he feared for his life. He would go on to claim that Donisha didn't have a cell phone, which is why he stood outside of her house yelling for her to come outside. Now, he would go on to admit that she did come to the window, and he told her that he was upset, and he did yell out, fuck crabs, but only because he was so emotional in the moment. But he would state that things got worse when RP would walk up to the window and stand next to Thanisha, holding a firearm, pointing it at him. And Dante would claim once he saw the firearm that RP was holding, that's why he put out his gun. He would then go on to claim that he fired 2 warning shots in the air simply because he feared for his life. He would state that he never ever pointed the gun towards the window, but once he got back into his car to leave, the gun accidentally went off, letting off another shot. He would then state that once he drove away, he heard another shot, and next he heard Thanisha screaming. That's when he turned back around and saw someone running from inside the house, and he immediately fled the scene. Now, with all this said, Dante's attorney argued that Dante's charges should be dropped to a heat of a passion, voluntary manslaughter, which only carried a maximum of 11 years. But prosecution disagreed, stating that the defense failed to prove that the victim engaged in any provocative conduct which caused Dante to lose all sense of judgment, which caused him to commit the murder under the influence of passion. They would also go on to state that Dante admitted during his testimony that he knew long before that Gregory and RP had been dating. So therefore, the night of the shooting, he acted purely off of judgment and not out of passion. And by the end of the trial, Dante Solomon will be found guilty of second-degree murder, attempted murder, felon in possession of a firearm, and shooting into an inhabited dwelling, and he would be sentenced to 55 years to life in prison, plus 34 years. I would like to thank everybody for tapping in, and I'll see y'all next time.